welcome Nick Mason, aka Living Dead drummer, to Home Is Where the Dark Is. Thanks for coming by, dude. It's been 4 years since our last little get-together and podcast. Before I had video, it was just audio, which was I still really liked our podcast then, but I'm glad to have you back. So.
No, it's cool, and I'm glad you've stuck with this and been able to crank it out and stuff like that. And you've had a lot of really cool people on your show and people, mutual friends that we have and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what was it, like a couple weeks ago, you hit me up and you're like, hey, it's the anniversary of the last time we sat down, and I was like, let's do it again.
Fuck it. Yeah. Absolutely. Because you've been busy, man. I've been keeping my eye on you. I've been seeing what you've been doing with the different projects and the touring. So let's just jump right into that, man. So cool. How has it been for you playing all these gigs and tours with Pretty Boy Floyd?
It's been good. It was kind of just swinging right away the minute things started to come back to life after the pandemic. Once doors started reopening and live music, people started dipping their toes back into live music. It was just on right from the word go with them, and it was kind of just like right place, right time, where they happened to need a new drummer and my name got tossed out to them, sort of thing, randomly from a friend who I guess they called a buddy of mine and he wasn't available. So he was like, call my buddy Nick. And here I am 4 years later, still doing it. We're actually getting ready to go on the road in a couple of weeks.
I saw that too. And you're playing with Jason Charles Miller.
Yeah. I started playing for Jason last year. I've known the guy for like 23 years. I knew him from way back in the Godhead days. And that's how he and I kind of met, was, again, like he needed a drummer for Godhead, 23 years ago or whatever. And he got in touch with me, but at the time, I was 18 and they're had zero real touring experience, just had been playing in my local bands regionally around the area and stuff like that for a few years. And there was no way I was going to get that gig. They were just coming off a tour with Marilyn Manson and Rammstein and all this stuff. So it was nah, that wasn't going to work out. But he and I stayed friendly all these years. And then last year he found himself in need of a drummer for his stuff again, temporarily. I was just filling in. So I did one tour with him. I spent a month on the road with him last year. And then in January of this year, he called me back up and he was like, you're the guy now. So now I've taken over the position permanently. We just started tour rehearsals this week. And we just shot a music video 3 days ago or 2 days ago for, he's got a new record coming out, I think later this month. The first single's already out. We just shot a music video for the second single. I just don't know release dates and stuff like that. And we're going out, we leave in 2 weeks, and we're going out for 3.5 weeks supporting Steel Panther. And then I go immediately. There's a week overlap with Pretty Boy Floyd.
I saw that. You're busy, dude.
So
You're a busy year.
Yeah, I got a buddy to fill in for me for a week, and then I'm gonna, as soon as Jason's tour is done, I'm on a plane flying to, I think, Toronto, and picking up the next 3 weeks of Floyd's tour, and that puts us into October.
I always find it so fascinating how we could be. There's periods of times in our careers where maybe we're in a slump or it's dried up a little bit, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, you get a call, and then your life is completely changed, at least for that year or for multiple years. It's sometimes you really have no idea where you're gonna be, where you're gonna end up.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's just so fascinating. How do you feel about that? Because it's we put so much time and passion into our craft and being a musician and playing music, and a lot of it, we think if I follow these steps and if I do these things and if I am professional and I show up and I'm a good person, then I'm gonna get those gigs that I've always wanted to get. But sometimes most of the time it's not really in our hands. It's a lot of it is chance and luck. But how do you feel about that?
Well, chance and luck is, you're right on. You're everything you said is accurate. You spend all the time preparing and making sure you're a decent person to hang around and stuff like that, because that's really important. Doesn't matter how good of a player you are, if you get out on the road and you're not so likable, or you're not getting along with people or something like that, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're out. You got to be able to hang. And yeah, you're right. Like, a lot of it's also just not in our hands, at least if you're like a side musician.
Yeah.
Like me being a drummer, my entire existence is reliant on other people, because I can't just go out and go on the road whenever I feel like it and tour whenever I feel like it. I'm a drummer. I need a band. I need, 2 or 3 or 4 people on stage with me to create that. If they decide, well, I'm taking a year off, I'm not going to go on the road, well, all right, now I'm unemployed. Or if they decide, oh, I'm not going to record any new material coming up, well, now I'm unemployed. Like, I'm not the one writing the songs. I'm not the one fronting it, singing the words, playing the guitar, whatever. So I can't just do it myself. If you are the person doing that, like if you are the principal songwriter, if you are putting pen to paper on all of that material, and you are the one that's able to pick up the guitar and go out front and whatever, you have a little more control over your own destiny, because you can go and perform or record whenever you want. Right. It's the rest of the people that you need around you that are dependent on you now. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. It's a great way to describe it, because like, I've been following your, like, the way you brand yourself, and like you have a very specific way of doing that, and I understand what you're saying, because it's like you kind of are, you're more of like a hired gun, so you're reliant on people getting in touch with you. Okay, we need you for this tour, we need you for this gig, so you're doing a lot of different projects, instead of like some people they have one project and they put their all into it, and maybe they'll interchange musicians over time, but you really rely on different musicians getting in touch with you. So your reputation matters, like your attitude matters, and so yeah, it's a great point. And I think a lot of musicians are in that state, like they can't just make a band and go tour. Like they have to rely on other people.
Yeah,
so.
And that's the biggest thing. And so it would be nice. There's something comforting about, like, I'm in a band, this is my band, and this is what you put your all into, like you said, right? There's something that I do like about that. I think over the years of doing this, I just got my heart broken too many times, because when you're in a band, it's like being in a relationship, and that, this has been said 1,000 times by 1,000 musicians. It is like you're married to those people that you're in that band with, and that doesn't always work out for the long run. Even if it does work out for the long run, look at how many like legacy acts are out there right now, where it's, oh, maybe it's all the original members still touring after 40 or 50 years, and then you find out things behind the scenes of like, oh, those guys hate each other. Like, they don't talk. They're all on separate buses. They don't socialize. They get on stage, and for 2 hours every night, they look like they're best friends, but they get off stage and they go to their hotels and they don't want to talk to each other anymore. They're doing it just to keep that music alive for their audience.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, these things don't work out long term. And just getting my heart stepped on too many times about like putting all that love and that energy into a project that ultimately doesn't pan out or doesn't work out. And maybe it's your fault, maybe it's somebody else's fault, maybe it's nobody's fault, maybe it just runs its course and it's done.
Yeah.
But that's where I decided, like, maybe I'll just play the hired gun game and, have less of an emotional attachment to what I'm doing overall. Not that I don't have an emotional attachment to it. Like, I love playing the drums, right? But the music that I'm playing comes almost secondary to my love for my instrument. So it doesn't matter if I'm playing with a pop singer tonight and a metal singer tomorrow and then a country singer next week. Like, I will find something enjoyable with all of it because I get to play my drums. And
Absolutely.
That's my number one, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, doing the hired gun thing, like the the other side of that is that you always have to be marketing. You always have to be making connections. You always have to be looking to what the next job is, because the one you're on is going to end at some point, and it might end temporarily, it might end permanently, but it will end. So like I've been off the road for 2 months. And so Floyd ended, we were out on tour until early June, first couple days of June. So for the majority of June, all of July, and here it is August 2nd now, we didn't play any shows. They took the summer off. Again, not my decision. I don't have say in that. That's, that's out of my control. So knowing ahead of time that I'm going to have a couple of months off before I go back to work again, that forces me to then, all right, I got to scrounge up some work. I got to hustle. I got to market. I got to make the phone calls. I got to let people know, hey, I'm back in town if you needed me for a thing. Or I try to get ahead of it way in advance, even before I leave for tour, and say, hey, I'll be back these times.
Yeah.
So, there's a handful of people that were talking to me about doing some recording sessions for them. And they all kind of hit me up right as I was about to hit the road. And I was like, okay, I will be back, June 3rd. So call me on June 3rd. We'll schedule everything. And that way I was trying to set up things for when I got back. And I'm doing that right now I'm letting everybody know. It's like, okay, I'm home October 1st. So from October 1st throughout the rest of the year, at the moment, there's no tours on the schedule, because that's when things start to wind down. Great, I'll be home. Let's record. Let's do a lesson. Let's do it. So I'm right now, that we're in the beginning of August, setting all of that stuff up for the fall.
Right.
Right, and you got to stay like 3 steps ahead.
Yeah, it's imperative because when you think about it, like the chances of, say you have, 3 months of a tour, you say you're touring January through January, February, March, and then you have April, May off, and then you go back June, July, August, kind of similar to what you did. The chances of, unless you plan it ahead of time, the chances of someone needing you like on those off times, like, and that being enough work for you is like super low unless you already have it planned out like way ahead of time. So like, that's why, it's helpful to plan things like as far in advance as possible. Like sometimes like some hired guns and producers and people, like they have stuff planned like 6 months to a year, sometimes more in advance because like of the scheduling and the overlap and all that. So this is kind of I'm just curious, because I've talked to a lot of people about this kind of a thing, but I'm curious on your take on it. How do you deal with, because we're freelance, so we do a similar kind of thing. We're working with different bands or working with different artists all throughout the year, and then when we realize, okay, I'm finishing this record now, so I'm looking for something else, or I'm finishing this tour now, so I'm looking for something else, and then you do what you said. Okay, I got to make some calls. I got to get in touch with people. How do you deal with rejection when people don't need you, but you really need that gig? Like, how do you process that?
Tend to try to throw as many darts at the board as I can. So if I know that, like, all right, I'm going to be available for this block of time during the year or something like that, if I know in advance, I will try to just let people know as much as possible, make phone calls, emails, texts, whatever it is, just go through my Rolodex of people and let them know, hey, I'm going to be free at this time, just to let you know. Like, just as an FYI, if you hear of anything, if you need a thing, if something pops up, like, keep me in mind, I'm going to be free this time to this time, kind of thing, right? So if I see one of those people then all of a sudden pop up with a gig, but they decided to go with somebody else and they didn't think to call me or whatever, there's a little mental gymnastics that I go through in my own head. At first my first reaction is like, oh man, why didn't he call me? But I also realized that this might have been something that was in motion way ahead of time. This might have been something that maybe somebody else made that connection, and it was the person I was in contact with, or the friend that I have that has their foot in that door. Maybe it was out of their hands and they had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And so I try to rationalize it that way a little bit. And it's funny because that scenario pretty much just happened not that long ago. But by the time it was made public and by the time I found out about it, oh, so-and-so is doing this gig. Oh, well, I know the producer and I know the keyboard player. And I was like, I have so many foots in that door. Why didn't they think to call me? Why did they call this other buddy of mine? Well, again, it could have been a million reasons. It could have been out of their control. And by the time I found out about it, like, they had already wrapped rehearsals and were getting ready to go on the road, kind of thing. So it was like, oh, well, how long ago was this decision even made? I didn't even know about the gig until today, and you just finished 2 weeks of rehearsal. So clearly I wasn't in the loop at all.
Yeah.
Anyway. So I try not to, get too down about that. There are times where you get like a straight up, no, or they look at your stuff and they don't think you're the right person for whatever reason and stuff like that. Or you try out for something and you don't get it and you really wanted it. And that sometimes can be a little bit harder. Yeah. And, and there's times where I get down about it where it never lasts long. It's like a day. Like, I allow myself like a pity party day where like I'm just moping around the house. I don't want to play the drums. I'm just super unmotivated. I'm just bummed that I lost out on this gig or whatever. And then usually the next day, I wake up the next morning like with this rejuvenated spirit where like the first thing I want to do is run to my studio and just go bash the drums and I'm immediately like on to the next thing. Okay, that's not going to work out. I had my moment, where I felt bad for myself, and that's done. What else? All right, that's off the books now. That one's off the table. I'm not even going to think about it. What else can I get? Where else can I go? What else can I do?
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, because I didn't mean to like put you on the spot with that question, but I want you to know, like, I want everyone to know I get rejected all the time, like constantly, but I'm constantly like, I have this system now, like over the years I've developed this system where like I have like this spreadsheet, and it's very, very specific, and I kind of go in rotation, and I I haven't talked to this person in like a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then I see something on maybe they posted something that I'm like, oh, let me get in touch with them, see what they're up to, and I never, I don't really go, it's just a, hey, what's up? I saw that you're going on tour, or you started a new whatever, haven't talked in a while, what's up?
Yeah. You
know what I mean? So I make a conscious effort to do that a lot. And basically, like, what I'm trying to say is I take a lot of shots, and I miss a lot of them. But I've developed this like muscle of doing that. So like what you said earlier about most of the time it's not because they don't like you or they don't like what you're doing. It's because there was just some other factor out of your control. Yeah. And the ones that do come through, great. But I'm just, at this point, like, and I'm sure it's for you, like, we're not going to stop doing this. So you just have to keep pushing through,
No, and sometimes it comes back around.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I found. Look, I'm going on tour in 2 weeks with Jason Charles Miller. I auditioned for him 23 years ago. 23 years ago. And I eventually got the gig. It took 23 years, but I got the gig, And and I'm not saying that like you got to wait 20 years to land a job with somebody you want to work with, but that happened for me. And I've definitely had situations where like it doesn't work out. It's a no. It's oh, we don't need somebody like we thought we did, whatever it is. And as long as you stay friendly with people and you stay cool about it, I've found that a lot of the time they do come back. And I've had situations like that where maybe a year, maybe even 2 years later, like your phone rings and they're like, hey, so we need you now.
Yeah,
or we
exactly.
need you again. And like you said, just staying friendly with people and staying in touch with them and stuff like that. And try not to take things personal, because sometimes it's beyond your control. I've had a couple situations with some pretty notable acts that, like, I'm not going to name drop them or anything like that, but some notable acts where I got a call like out of the blue, randomly, and they're like, "Hey, would you be available for this thing?" And I look at the calendar. Yes, I am available for it. Great. And it goes as far as like they send me their set and I learn it. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready to rock. Let's do this. And then they're like, well, we're not actually quite sure. It was a situation where it'd be like, I'm just a sub and I'm just filling in for one tour or something like that. And they're like, well, we're still trying to figure things out on our end. It's like, okay. So right away that tells me that, okay, you're putting feelers out to possible subs, but you don't know if you actually need one yet. Right? So you try not to get your hopes up. And then, and I've had it happen a few times where it's like, okay, actually we got things sorted out. Turns out we don't need a sub like we thought we did. So in a situation like that, like, it's a bummer because it's like, oh man, I wanted this gig. It would have been great. It would have been fun. It's a band I really like, or it's whatever it is. And I always leave it at this. Like, my default response to that always is, no problem. I got the set down. So if anything happens, if plans change or whatever, and you need me, let me know. I got the material in the bag, right? And so, and a lot of the time there's nothing last minute that'll cause them to like change their mind. Like, the tour goes off and it's fine. But now they know in the back of their mind, they're like, well, we got a guy that already knows the set in case we run into a situation like this again later in the year or next year or 2 years from now. We can always call that guy back and be like, hey, why don't you dust those songs off? You already learned them all. Dust them off and come out with us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I always try to stay on very good terms with people in those types of situations. And I try not to burn any bridges, and I try not to get angry about it or anything like that, because, like I said, they might come back, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years later and say, hey, actually, we do want you to come out and do this thing with us now. We're in another situation where we need a guy, and you already know the material. We've already talked to you in the past.
And also they could, everyone talks. So if, they say, yeah, Nick, he we got in touch with him and he learned the songs like immediately and he was ready. Like, and if other people learn that about you, then you're going to get hit up by other bands. Like, other people like, oh, Nick is the real deal. Like, Nick, when you contact him and, if he's interested, he does the work and he's ready to go. So it's always a good thing.
It's a reputation you want to uphold. It's a good reputation to have, and that you want to try to maintain that always.
Yeah.
And that's it too. It's like, all of the best gigs are word of mouth. I've never landed like a really good job from an audition. Like, almost never happens. And it's almost exclusively recommendation. Somebody who already knows you. People say it's all who you know. No. It's who knows you. Not
Sure.
who you know. Who knows you. And says, I got a guy I know who'd be perfect for this job. Let's call him. And so it's always personal recommendation. It's always leading to the best gigs. So the more people that can be familiar with you, your work ethic, your professionalism and stuff like that, that's going to go a long way. And like, I was just teaching this to a couple of my younger students as well, that they were asking about like landing gigs and stuff like that and how you do it. And this kind of even calls back to like your question about dealing with rejection of like, oh, well, this guy knows me. Why didn't he call me? A lot of the time it's who's fresh in your mind. Exactly. That's the big thing. Is most of the time when I recommend somebody else for a gig, the first person I think of is whoever I just talked to last.
Yeah. Or
Even
or whoever is like posting the most drum videos that are constantly in your face on your phone. That's another thing.
That could lead to it also.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time it's like I've recommended people on gigs just simply because, oh, you know who I was out having a beer with last night? This guy. Call him.
Yeah.
Even though I might have 12 bass players in my phone and somebody says, hey, do you got a recommendation for a bass player? I'm not scrolling through my phone going, oh, who would be right for that at first? My first call is always going to be whoever I just talked to the most recently and who's fresh in my mind.
Exactly.
And if that person's not going to be isn't available or can't do it or whatever, then I go to my Rolodex and go, oh, okay, who would be good for this kind of thing? But it's always like who's fresh in your mind. So that's the other thing too that I try to remind myself when I'm not getting a job is, oh, well, I know 3 people in that band. Why didn't they call me? Well, because the guy they called, they probably, like, one of them is friends with them and they probably were just hanging out or just saw him or, you know what I mean, had dinner with them 2 weeks ago or whatever, and they were the one that was the freshest in their mind. They were the person that they saw most recently. That person's always going to get the phone call first.
Yeah, and it's really easy to drive yourself crazy thinking about why, and it's like it's most of the time it's not about you. You know what I mean? So that's another thing. But yeah, and what you said about how it's mostly word of mouth, like I agree with that. But there's one situation that happened recently that I want to know your thoughts on.
Okay.
The new Smashing Pumpkins guitarist.
Mm-hmm.
At first I was like, that's an interesting choice, but not in a negative way. Like, wow, because she's kind of goes off by like being a shredder, and Smashing Pumpkins isn't necessarily that style of music, like shredding guitar. But
right. And they were looking for somebody to pick up just rhythm, correct?
I'm not sure, but I was like, wow, that's I would have never thought that would be the new guitarist. But now seeing her like on live footage and seeing the shows and seeing, I'm like, well, you know what, that really works, and she looks great up there, and I'm like, that works great. And I was just like, they put out a casting call for that, or an audition, and I was like, that's an interesting way of going about it, because like Billy knows plenty of guitarists, he knows everybody, you know what I mean? So I thought it was intentional.
The big cattle call casting thing, when I first saw that, I was like, this is gonna be a shit show. Because you're gonna have to sort through so many submissions, and 99.9% of them are gonna be terrible. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, there's been a few times where like a bigger artist has done some sort of cattle call audition, and every time that happens, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a nightmare. And usually like I want no part of that, like where it's like so-and-so is auditioning for drummers and it's a big public thing. I'm like, oh, this is going to be terrible. Ugh. When it came to the Smashing Pumpkins thing, when they put out that big cattle call thing, I did send it to a bunch of my friends. There was a handful of guitar player friends. Again, it was like people that like were the most fresh in my mind, where it was like people that I was currently working with or something like that. And I'm like, hey, Smash Pumpkins is looking for a thing. And I'd send them the link or whatever. With the pick that they went with, I was actually really happy to see that, because she's a friend. And like, I know a lot of people know her from her videos that she puts up online and stuff like that, but that wasn't what introduced me to her and her playing. It was, we played together. Oh, cool. Like years ago, it was her and a couple of other girls, and they were putting together, I don't remember, no, oh man, it was so long ago. I don't remember if it was an existing band where they were just doing a drummer switch, or if they were trying to put something new together. And I came in and I jammed with them, and we had a great time. We had a blast, and like, it was a lot of fun. We all got along, and then like just nothing happened. Like the band just never materialized, kind of thing. And they actually, almost everybody in that band has gone on to be in bigger bands now. Like every single girl, it was like three. It was me and like 3 girls, and like every single one of them is in a huge band right now. And she was like kind of the last one, the last holdout, where it was like...
Was it Visual of War?
No, it was before that.
Okay.
That's sort of what came out of this. But it was before that started.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think what happened was like the project they were trying to put together didn't quite materialize, and then it sort of became Visual of War. Gotcha. Right? But I stayed in good standing terms and stayed friendly with everybody. Anytime we saw each other out in public, it's nothing but, oh my God, how you doing? Hugs and stuff like that. And so I was really happy when she got the gig. I was like, that's great. That I sent her a text right away, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. That's so amazing. That's incredible. But I, like most people, only knew her work from the videos she was putting online and stuff like that. And I don't really subscribe to that sort of like internet musician thing, where it's like the TikTok musicians and the Insta drummers and YouTube musicians and stuff like that. I don't pay attention to any of that. I don't know who any of them are. When people are like, a buddy of mine wanted me to come out and like jump up on stage with him and jam a song with him just this past Monday for a thing he was doing, and I couldn't make it. We had tour rehearsals with Jason starting, so I couldn't make it. But in his text, he's like, "Oh, so and so is going to be there," and I straight up was like, "I don't know who that is." And I looked it up, and it's like, "Oh, he's some Insta drummer who's got 9 million followers." Like, I was like, "Okay, good for him." I don't know who this person is. He's not in a band, you know, and I think some people. When Pumpkins picked Kiki and they I think some people kind of wrote it off as like, oh, she's a YouTube guitarist. I didn't have that perception of her because like I'd actually been in a room with her where she was plugged into an amp. You know what I mean? I had the perception of, no, she's a guitar player. She plays in bands and stuff like that. I've seen her play in bands. I've seen her on stage. I've been in a room with her where we've played together. So if she's doing videos and stuff like that too, like, sure, good for her. But I didn't equate her as like a YouTube musician kind of thing, and that only rose in popularity because of that.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So I was very happy for her. And I was really, it was really nice to see it go to somebody I knew too. Because if it's just some random person that you've never heard of, and you're like, oh, okay, who cares? But when it's somebody that, you know, you consider to be a friend, you're like, oh my God, I'm just so happy. I'm happy when my friends land a good gig and like go on to successful things. It makes me feel good that people man. I know are doing great things. Especially
the ones that really deserve it.
Yeah,
that have been grinding for years. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's almost rewarding. In a weird sense of like, well, my friends are doing great things now.
Yeah, and it's inspiring too. It's like, wow, it just makes you want to work harder and keep going and, you know, keep your dream alive too.
Yeah, you can use it for your own motivation too. Of, you know, it's real easy if you're in kind of a rut or you don't have anything going on for a while or anything at all in front of you on your calendar or something like that. It's hard to get the motivation to like pick up your instrument and want to practice it. But like I force myself to do it even on days where I wake up and I'm like, I just don't want to go and practice today. I always force myself to do it anyway because I don't want my chops to get dull. Yeah. I want to stay as on top of my game as I can. So if somebody does call me tomorrow out of the blue, I'm ready to go. You know, and it's not like, well, I haven't touched my drums in a month. No, even though I have not been on tour in the last 2 months, and I've not been playing shows in the last 2 months, I played one show in the last 2 months, I'm still at my studio behind the drums for a minimum of 3 hours a day, every day. Like, regardless of like, well, I don't have anything to work on. I don't have anything to practice on. Like, I'm not preparing for a gig. No, but I can work on this thing that I suck at, or I can work on this thing that I really need to sharpen up or maintain. You know, I know on the next tour, there's going to be a demand for me to do a certain thing that, well, let me practice stuff that's going to help with that. So then when I get out there on the road, I can kill it and I'm not going to suck at that thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, you know, going to the gym, and then when you stop and you go back, it's like, oh man. And it's, you know, like if you take a couple weeks off, or if you're down and then you do get called for that gig, and it's like, oh fuck, I haven't been rehearsing for weeks. Now I'm like having to catch up and get back on the horse, and you're like, fuck.
You don't ever want to be caught with your pants down like that, where it's like, oh man, I haven't gone and practiced in a couple of weeks, and then, you know, because some stuff, like, even though you everyone tries to plan out their schedule in as far in advance as you can, there is occasions where things pop up last minute.
Oh yeah.
And I've definitely gotten called where it's like, can you learn this thing in like 2 days and come out and do it? You know, like it doesn't happen all the time, but it does occasionally happen. And the last thing you want is to be unprepared.
Yeah. I always have this kind of, not a nightmare, but I always have this like kind of dreaded thought that one day I'm going to get like some opportunity, but it's going to need to be like, okay, you need to be ready by like tomorrow because someone fell through. I better start learning like all these bands' songs and just be able to recall them at any time, because it's like, if that happens, like say one of your favorite bands hits you up to like their drummer got sick or there's something happened to their drummer and they're on tour and there's like months left in the tour, and they hit you up, but they're like, you need to fly out tomorrow and do this 2-hour set. It's like, fuck, I don't know all these songs. Like how do you, and it's like, you're going to be so mad at yourself if you can't do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I always have that. I mean, it's an extreme example, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it is, but it also will force you to always make sure that you're going to be prepared with it. And even if like, you know, I used to think that like if I learned a bunch of songs for somebody and then the gig doesn't happen or whatever, that I had wasted my time. Oh my God, what did I learn 12 songs for if I'm not even going to do this gig now? And I used to kind of get a little irritated by that, but now my perspective has changed a little where it's okay, no, that was a great exercise. I took the time to learn all of these songs, and even though I'm not going to get to play those songs, just the exercise of learning all of the specifics of those tunes, learning all the stops, all the count-ins, all the outros, all the what do they do live versus what's on the record. You got to make sure you hit the accent coming out of that second chorus because it doesn't do it in the third chorus. Like learning all of those little nuances, things like that, all just sharpens your skills as a musician overall in general.
Yeah.
Right? It's like practicing for a gig you do have, but practicing for the gig you're going to have at some point.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And that happened to me earlier this year. Like I want to say it was like back in February, something like that. Buddy of mine called me up. Hey man, we it looks like we might need a drummer. Things aren't working out with the guy we got, this and that. And I was most excited because it was a gig where, you know, the bass player is like one of my closest friends, and we've toured all over the world together, and this was going to be another opportunity for us to yet again play together. So I was really stoked for that, you know. And I talked to the band's keyboard player, and he kind of said, okay, here's our set, and it's like 3 hours of material.
Oh God. Yeah.
And he goes, out of all these songs, you know, pick 8 of them, which that's a set right there, 8 songs. Pick 8 of them, you know, whichever ones, you know, pick 8 off the list. And then once you got them down, you know, give us a call. We'll set up a time to jam. Great. I learned 8 songs in a week. And, you know, I tried to learn like 2 a day. So it was really, I had them down in, you know, 4 days. So at the end of the week, I called them back up. I said, hey, I got everything ready to go. I got 8 songs in the can. Let's do this. And it was like, oh, okay, well, we can't this week because we're playing this thing at this casino. Okay, well, when you get back. Okay. And then we never could get it scheduled right because they always had something going on. Then they all of a sudden had like, you know, a lineup change, and they needed a new lead singer. And because the singer was leaving and being replaced, the previous drummer who was out the door decided to stay. So I never got to play those songs.
Fuck, yeah.
I learned them all. I never, ever got to play them other than on my own. And rather than get pissy about it, like, oh my God, what did I wait? What, these guys completely wasted my time by making me learn all this stuff. But instead of having that perspective on it, and instead of coming at it like you guys wasted my time, I was just like, well, now I know those 8 songs. So if something happens a year from now and they call me back up, well, I can just dust those off real quick. Plus, it was a great exercise in learning some material that I, A, wasn't familiar with all of, and B, some of it was very complicated stuff too. And it was nice to be able to sit down and pull out all the specifics of every song. And again, like I said, looking at videos of like, well, how do they play it live? Because they're not doing it what's on the record, because on the record, this song fades out and you can't do that live. So how do they end it?
Yeah.
You know, and learning the intricacies of these 8 songs was just such an outstanding exercise every day, that even after it looked like this gig was just not going to happen, I continued to like still practice those 8 songs for a while on a daily basis, just to keep my chops up on the songs, because I had been having fun playing them. So I started using them as a warm-up. It's like, all right, well, I'll warm up with these songs before I turn to the material that I got to work on now. You know, so I didn't get irritated at all that the gig didn't work out and I learned this mountain of material for it. It was like, no, it was good. It was like doing it was like being back in school and just having to do homework that you don't realize is going to pay off at some point, you know.
Absolutely.
Or just expand your educational knowledge. Yeah.
And I find too, like, the more songs you learn, the better you get at learning songs, if that makes sense. Like, the faster you can learn songs, because if you're learning really like, it depends on the genre, of course, but if you're learning, like, say a band like Cradle of Filth, extremely technical, weird, fast, weird arrangements, stuff that like it's really hard to memorize because a lot of it doesn't repeat, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And when you're having to learn these things that are like really intricate and longer songs and technical, and you're doing like you're constantly doing that, and then when you go to have to learn like maybe something a little bit more simple, you can do it faster. Like you can get it in your memory quicker because you're used to that. You have that, you're working that muscle. And then I noticed when I've gone for like, I haven't really learned someone else's song in quite a while, now that I think about it. But there's a period of times where I like to do that, and maybe do like playthrough videos, or just for the fun of it, learn other people's songs. But when I find that like after I start doing it for a little bit, it just gets easier to transcribe and to commit it to memory. But I find that like if you go for a long time without doing that and then trying to get back into it, it's hard.
I've definitely had that experience myself, where like, all right, so for the last 4 years, my primary gig has been touring with Pretty Boy Floyd. There's nothing new there. We're playing the same songs for the last 4 years. I think we've only added maybe, in the last 4 years, maybe 3 songs that I had to learn that I didn't have to learn out of the gate. Like, right, you know, first gig with them, we're learn everything that's on the debut record, because their anniversary tour, like the 30th anniversary of the debut record, that tour got cut short because of the pandemic. So in 2021, when I got hired, they were basically doing all of the makeup dates from that 30th anniversary. So for that whole first year, for all of 2021, we were only playing the first record. And it wasn't until 2022 that they were like, all right, now that we've gotten that out of the way, we can sprinkle in some other stuff that is off some of the later records. But honestly, it was only like 3 songs. So maybe 4. So it wasn't like I had to learn a lot of extra material. And because that's been the primary gig for the last bunch of years, yeah, I didn't exercise that muscle very much of having to learn new material. And the first time I got presented with that was last year, when I had to go and tour with Jason. And so he's got a back catalog that expands 2 decades, where it's like, okay, you have to learn. He over prepares. So if last year we opened for Faster Pussycat, and I want to say we played maybe a 40-minute set or something like that, right? But rather than just say, here's the set, this is what we're going to play, learn it, he'll say, here's a batch of songs, and it'll be more than we need. It'll be an hour and a half of material. And that way we can get into a room, we can start practicing the stuff, and then he can sort of arrange the set based on what he feels is flowing good and what's working, what's maybe not working. That one doesn't, you know, we played even up through the first, I'd say, week of the tour. He's rearranging the set every night, trying different things out. And because we had learned so much material, we had the ability to do that. We're not, you know, take this one out of the set tonight. Let's play this one. Well, maybe we'd never played that one before, but we all learned it. We all rehearsed it ahead of time. So even though we haven't played it on stage together in the last 3 nights, we can throw that one in anytime we want, right?
How do you feel about that? Do you mind when the sets are changed up, or do you prefer them to stay the same?
I prefer the set to stay the same because it makes things tighter because you're doing it more often. But like I said, he will only change up the set the first few nights of a tour, maybe the first week, and then kind of see, he'll observe of like what the crowd response is, what's working well with the other bands that we're touring with, you know, what maybe their audience, especially if we're a support act, what maybe their audience is clicking with versus what they're not. Oh, we're playing this slow ballad and the audience hasn't dug it the last 2 nights. Let's ditch that one out of the set, put something more energetic in. So he's kind of like shuffling the deck just for the first few shows, and then from that point, it's the same thing for the rest of the tour. Gotcha. And it stays. But like he will kind of just, kind of gauge it that first week of tour. So yeah, the first time I had like a big block of songs to learn was last year after having a while of not having to do that. And oh my God, it was like I'm sitting down at my drum set with a pen and paper to chart everything out. I'm just like, oh my God. And it just, because I was so out of practice with it and I hadn't had to chart anything in a while. And I was like, I used to be doing this stuff every day. And then all of a sudden I stopped for a few years because I didn't have to do it for a minute. And yeah, it was a struggle to get back on. But now, and so we're getting ready to go on tour again. He's got a new record out. So guess what? Another big batch of songs comes. So it's not only like I got to refresh all the old material, but now we have, 6 brand new songs that he wants to try to work into the set too. And he, like right away, says, we're not going to play all these, but like, let's
have them ready.
Let's have them ready. Let's practice all of them. Let's have them ready. And that way we can see what I'd love to play this song every night, but if the audience isn't vibing with it the first couple of shows, like it's got to go and we got to throw something in that they will like. And so I don't mind that over preparedness. It's pretty smart to do it that way. And like I kind of just this year I used to stress out like learning new material, and because I chart everything out. That's the best way for me to learn a new song is to sit with a pen and paper and actually write out the song. And I don't do really elaborate charts, but they'll be mostly just arrangement charts. So I'll write, if the whole band comes in all together off the count in, I'll make a note of that and put 4x. And that means I got to count the band in 4, if it's a 4 count anyway. And that indicates to me, that's my shorthand hieroglyphic telling me the band starts together. If the so
you have like your own charting system.
I got my own system for it, yeah. And it's very, very, very shorthand. So if a verse is 8 measures long, I write VSX8, verse times 8. So I can just look at basically the number and go, okay, 8 bars of this. And then chorus will be CH times 16, or if it's 16 bars or whatever, right? If I come to a very specific part in a song that's maybe a little more complicated, a very specific drum fill, a very specific accent or something like that, that I know, like, I got to hit this accent with the guitar or something like that, I will actually write the notation out. But it'll only be for those parts. Or like if it's a specific drum fill at the end of a chorus. Let's say the chorus is 8 measures, right? I'll write chorus times 7 and then write actually write out that drum fill that's on, you know, the 8th measure, and then put a line under it with an 8. So that way I know that the chorus is actually 8 measures, but I'm only shorthanding the first 7 because there's something specific on measure 8.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
And I can do that pretty quickly, listening through a song just once, and then be able to play the song right after it. And I used to get really overwhelmed with the amount of material, though. Someone gives you their set list and it's 10 songs or whatever. I'm looking at 10 songs going, oh my God, how am I going to get through all this? And what I actually just started doing like a few months ago, which has taken all that pressure off, is only doing 2 songs a day and not doing more than that. I will only do 2 songs a day. So, and I started doing it when I had to learn those 8 songs for that band that where it never even went anywhere. Is they said learn 8 songs, but they gave me 3 hours of material, and I was like, I just like looking at the sheer volume of it like was overwhelming. So I was like, okay, wait, I don't want to wait weeks to call them up and say I got these songs down. I want to be able to turn around and call them as quickly as possible and say, I got these songs down, right? Because the longer you wait, the more they're going to be like, what's taking this guy so long?
Right.
You know? So I was like, I did the math. I was like, they want 8 songs. If I do 2 songs every day, that's 4 days. I can be ready by the end of the week. So Monday, I picked 2 songs that I was already vaguely familiar with already. Great. I already kind of know these songs. It won't be hard. And then I went to the next 2 and the next 2. So I did 2 songs Monday, 2 songs Tuesday, 2 songs Wednesday, 2 songs Thursday. Friday, I was like, I got 8 songs down. Here we go. You know,
go, man. Yeah.
And so I've been doing it that way with everybody since then, where whenever I got a block of songs I got to learn, 2 songs a day, you know, generally that means you can have a whole set of material down in a week.
Yeah, and it's silly to like, unless you're, you know, kind of one of those freak prodigy people that can learn like there's people that can listen to a song once and just play it. Most of us can't do that, but so it's
the song's easy enough. I can do it, but it's got to be super easy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm automatically thinking like more technical music. That's just where my mind goes to. But yeah, I mean, it's more realistic to break it up like that, because you're just going to overwhelm yourself if you go, okay, crap, they need me to learn 10 songs. I need to learn all 10 songs today. Like, I mean, it's
right. And I used to try to do that, and I would overwhelm myself, and then none of the songs were very good because I was trying too many things at once. And so I have in my lesson room where I teach drum lessons, I actually have a wooden plaque hanging up on the wall. And I point it out to students all the time, and I go, read that and tell me what it means. It's a quote from Bruce Lee. And it says, I fear not the man who's practiced 10,000 kicks once. I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times.
Exactly.
And that quote just stuck out to me so much in terms of like, this is what your work ethic should be, that I had a wooden plaque made. A buddy made it, laser cut it for me and everything like that. And I hung it in my lesson room just to point out to my students. But it's also something that I try to put into practice on my own too, where it's like, no, if I overwhelm myself trying to learn these 10 songs or whatever, none of them are going to be any good. You take it slow, you take it 1 or 2 at a time, focus all your energy into that until you got it down, then move on to the next one.
I think that's a great like metaphor too, just for life, like for succeeding in life, is like, because I think some people try to do, you know, and I've even been guilty of this as well. Like sometimes I think people think, well, I need to do a bunch of things and see what sticks. You know what I mean? I need to do everything and then see which one is the most successful for me. But I think like if you find what you're passionate about and just focus 110% on that, I think you have a much better chance of being successful in that, instead of, you know, doing a bunch of shit and not really succeeding in any of it. You know what I mean? Right.
Putting too many eggs in too many baskets and stuff like that. I've been guilty of that before too. And I try not to do that as much. It's like I like doing other things and I like dipping my fingers into other things, but at the end of the day, sitting behind a drum set is always priority number one, and that's never going to go away, and that's never going to get sidelined because I'm doing 10 other things instead of it.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, I've always kind of had that mindset of like, there is no plan B. Like, you're doing this and that's it. It makes it harder. It makes it a struggle. And as we talked about before, it's like, well, sometimes you're sleeping on the couch in your studio.
Well, I think it's the mental battle of it, because it's, you know, it's such a challenging thing to go through mentally, because you're, you know, unless you get very successful right away, which most of us don't, there are exceptions to that. But on your journey, it's it's a very challenging mental test, because you're going to go through all kinds of different, you know, get to the top of a mountain, but then you have to go back down into a valley even lower than where you were. And then to get back up, it's like a constant ride, a constant roller coaster of emotions, and like second guessing yourself and, you know, all that. But yeah, you're right. I think, you know, if you go into it just like, oh no, I'm only doing this, like no plan B, I think that's a lot more, I don't know. I respect that when people have that mentality, and I also think it's more productive in the long run, because I've chosen something, and I've always wanted to do it, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to do it. So there's no going back. Like, this is, I'm a lifer, and I can tell you're a lifer. So, but there are going to be challenges like at every stage. So you just have to get your mind right. You know what I mean? Just like kind of what we were talking about earlier, like with the rejection thing, it's like, it's just part of the process. You just have to just push through it.
And
you know?
like, I tried really hard early on to like prepare myself for that sort of thing of like, it's going to be hard. You're going to have slow periods where you're broke. You're going to have relationships that are going to fall apart because you're putting too much into this and not that. You're going to have rejection. You're going to have like all of that stuff. I tried to like mentally prepare for that right from day one. When I decided like I wanted to play the drums for a living, like I knew all of that stuff was going to come with it, and I tried to prepare myself to be like, this is going to be hard, and I'm going to have to deal with all that stuff. And I think that sort of helped along the way. It doesn't mean that you're not going to fall into bouts of depression, and you're not going to struggle when the times do get tough and stuff like that. It just means that like you always have that to remind yourself, like, hey man, you knew this was coming. You signed up for this. You knew exactly what you were getting yourself into, and this is sometimes a part of it, you know? And then, you know, I try not to get too hard about it too, where like you see somebody that like is way younger than you and they do like catch success like real quick, and you like, I try so hard, but sometimes I'm like, this motherfucker's they don't know what it's like to sweat it out in the dirty clubs, you know, for 30 years and like, you know, coming home at 4 a.m. with $5 in your pocket and your back hurts, and you're like, they never had to experience that shit, you know. And it's hard to sometimes like not do that,
right.
You know.
I think no matter what people say, whether they will admit it or not, I think everyone has had that experience, like especially in the creative arts, and we see people much younger than us like reach that success much faster, and a lot of the time we think it's undeserved, but you know, that's their journey. You know, you can't let it deter you or upset you. But I think, you know, I'll admit it, I've seen people I've seen people do very well and get those gigs that I wanted, or reach success so much faster for silly reasons. You know what I mean? Like you can be famous these days from the most ridiculous shit that has nothing to do with music, or has nothing to do with hard work, or has nothing to do with like actually loving it. It's just, it's a different world. You know what I mean? So yeah, I totally feel you there, and I think most people understand that. But you know, it's like, you just have to keep going. Like that's the thing.
Yeah, I don't ever let that sort of feeling deter me, or take away my own motivation, or you know, put a halt to what I'm doing. Like, I still move forward and I still chug along. But sometimes it is like you sit there and you feel like this guy doesn't deserve that gig. He hasn't had to work for it, you know? And you get your ass chapped a little bit, but I never ever let it like stop me from still continuing to like move forward. Right. You know, I'm still going to get up tomorrow and go hit the books, you know, I'm still going to sit behind my drums and practice all day and still try to make those other connections and stuff like that. And, you know, right now I'm in very much just tour preparation mode where I'm trying to do all the logistical things. Like, I just had drums pulled apart in my studio all week trying to be like, okay, do an inventory. I gotta call and I gotta order some more sticks and I need these drum heads. I got enough of those ones. And, you know, that's where my head's been at all week with it. But as soon as I got that, and I'm trying to do it now 2 weeks ahead of time, so that way the next 2 weeks I can focus on practice all the material you got to do on tour. I got to practice all the material for the tour after that because there's no rehearsal. I just got to get on a plane and go and,
wow.
and just do it. So I got to rehearse on my own for that. And then third behind those two is like, try to dig up stuff for when those tours are done. Yeah. Those tours are going to be done October 1st. So my other big priority right now is preparing for, okay, October 2nd, what do I got? Right. Yeah. You know, and it's all stuff you got to do way in advance. We're 2 months out from that, but I'm trying to plan, you know, 2, 3, 5 months in advance as much as I can on my own. And like we talked about at the beginning, it's not necessarily up to me, but I can at least try to thread the needle as much as I can in hopes that somebody is going to be like, hey man, I need you on this track, or hey, we had a thing pop up and we're going on the road for 2 weeks in November and you said you're available, right? You know, you just try to thread those needles as far in advance as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for people to be reminded of that, or you know, for people that maybe are starting in their career, like it's important to set those things up in advance. Like, while, you know, maybe you get a tour for 3 months, but if you're not planning for when you get back, you know, you're gonna be sitting there with nothing to do. You always got
to plan.
So
for
yeah,
that.
I know it sounds like it is. That's the thing. Like, this is a lot of work. It's not just playing your instrument. It's more of the job is everything else.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It kind of drives me nuts when I'm out on the road and I see the other musicians I'm with not setting things up for when the tour is done. You know, like it's weird. Like it kind of like it bugs me a lot where I'll be, you know, on the computer and on the phone and I'm constantly working and trying to just keep the train moving forward because I know, okay, this tour ends on this date and I gotta, you know, have stuff lined up to keep me moving until the next tour, right? And then when I see other musicians that I'm around not doing that, and you talk to them and you're like, so what do you got after this? And they're like, we'll see what happens when it's done. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you waiting until you get home to then try to land another gig or move on some other project or something like that? Why are you not doing that right now?
Yeah.
So that way it's ready to go when you get home.
Because like the probability of a gig landing in your lap the day you get back from a tour without you doing anything.
Even when I see like full bands where maybe it's not just like, you know, me being a hired gun is one thing, but maybe it's a band situation where like it's the guys in the band aren't hired guns. Like it's their band, right? And when I see them not planning their next move, they're just going to wait till they get home and then start to work on whatever's next. It's like, why are you waiting? You're going to lose all your momentum. You're going to come off this hot tour and you're going to have gas in the tank from it. But if you don't have things planned out for the next 6 months to a year, like you're going to go on empty. And then it's going to be 10 times, you're going to be starting over from zero, and it's going to be 10 times as hard to get that momentum back. You got to move while you have that momentum.
Yeah.
So I tell bands this all the time. I'm like, you got to plan everything out 6 months in advance. So if you're on the road for a month in October, even before that tour starts, you should already be planning the tour you're going to do in April. And before that tour starts, you should be planning the next one you're going to be doing in October. You should plan these things out way in advance. If you wait until, a lot of people like to take a little breather after a tour. So if your tour ends November 1st and you wait until like November 20th to even start thinking about what your band is going to do next, you've already fucked up.
Right.
You've already fucked up and you've already failed, and you might as well just pull the plug on the whole thing. And I've seen that happen so many times.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're saying this, because I don't think, unless you're already like yourself, like you're already professional doing this, everyone knows this already. But if you're trying to like make it, I mean, all this stuff has to be planned so far in advance. And these tour cycles and these festivals is like, it's not like they hit you up a month before. It's like you have to have this stuff ready to go. Like,
I have dates booked in September 2025 right now. I'm not allowed to say where they are or what they are because it hasn't been announced yet, but I already have September 2025 dates on my calendar. That's 13 months in advance. And I mean, the situation I'm kind of talking about like a band just losing all their momentum and not moving forward like that literally just happened to me with another band that I've spent the last couple of years touring with, where we did I told them, I'm going to go on a rant for a minute.
Let's go.
Because I don't normally do this. I try to play straight up the middle. I try to be so professional when I'm sitting down doing interviews and stuff like that. And I'm about to lose it because it irritated me so much. So last April, so over a year ago, a band I've been touring with. Now, again, I'm just the hired guy. It's not my band. Okay. But I've been employed by them for a couple of years. They first hired me during the pandemic, like in 2020. And, they've been slow to roll things out, but they were picking up steam, picking up momentum. We did a couple of tours where we're out for a couple of weeks here. We're going and doing some weekend dates where we're flying out, playing 3 shows, flying back. Things were heading in the right direction. They signed with a new management company. They got offered a really great tour for last October. And it was like in April that this all came up. And I remember standing in my kitchen on like a Zoom call with the tour manager, the bus driver, the merch girl, and all the members of the band. Like all of us on one pre-production Zoom thing. And I remember telling them, look, we're going out on the road. We start the tour at the end of September. We come home at the end of October. We're out for, it was like 4.5 weeks or something like that. We need to start thinking about what we're going to do 6 months after that. We need to start planning now, a year in advance, what we're going to do after that tour. Because that tour is going to come. It's going to be great. I'm sure it's going to go very well. We're going to have a good time on it. But at the minute that tour ends, we need to drop the next bomb. We need to say, hey, if you liked seeing us on this tour, here's our next single, or here's our next record, and here's our next tour. Like, we got to have one in the chamber ready to go. And they didn't listen to me. And we went on that tour in October, and it went great. We had a blast. Everybody got along with all of the other acts that we were on the tour with. In fact, I still stay in touch with some of them, and a few of them are coming out to see me on the Floyd tour in a couple months, which is great. And I kept telling them right while we were on that tour, I'm like, guys, we got to be planning 6 months in advance. We got to start setting something up right now for April or May. Like 6 months from now, we should get off this tour and be ready to let people know right away what we're doing next. And I harped on them about it, and they didn't do it. They didn't listen to me. And we got off that tour, and it went radio silent for like a month, and they had nothing. Now, they did, you know, come home pretty deep in the hole on that tour. Like, they did lose quite a bit of money on that tour. It was as much of a success as it was. They're a newer band. They're a newer unknown band. They're a support band. You know, it was, and that was the other thing in that original conversation a year ago that I told them, be prepared to not make money on this tour. You're investing all of this into, we got to have the bus, and we got to have the merch, and we got to have the this, and we got to have the that. And you're investing all this upfront capital into it. Be prepared to not make money.
They had a bus?
We had like a 55-foot RV with a trailer on the back.
Okay.
You know? And I just kept telling him, like, if you break even on this, it'll be a miracle. And I tried to prepare them for that 6 months ahead of time. And again, they didn't listen to me. They didn't listen to me at all. They kept talking about, like, oh, well, we're thinking we'll probably sell out of merchandise and have to reorder within the first week. I'm like, okay, you're spending $40 on a concert ticket. At the end of the night, whose t-shirt are you going to buy first? Whose $30 shirt are you going to buy? The band you bought the ticket to go see, or the band you never heard of that happens to be opening for them? You already spent tons of money on the concert ticket, a couple of beers. You got a little bit of scratch left over to buy a t-shirt at the end of the night. You really think they're going to buy a t-shirt from a band they just happened to see and had never heard of before? Or you think they're going to spend money on the band that they actually bought the ticket to go see? Like, what world are you living in that you think you're going to sell out of merchandise in the first week when no one's ever heard of you?
Where do you think that comes from? Like, to me, like, where does that, like, I don't know if it's entitlement, but where do you think that delusion comes from?
I don't know. I've never been able to put my finger on it. I don't know if it's entitlement. I think it's just this weird, well, I'm in a band, so people know I'm in a band kind of mentality without realizing that you're in a band that no one's ever fucking heard of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And your biggest amount to gain a following is going out and doing this tour as a support act. This is going to be better for you than anything you've done so far. And that it was. In this situation, going out on that tour gained them a great following. All their numbers went up across all of their social media platforms, all of their viewers, all of their streaming, all the numbers went up on this tour, which was outstanding. The next single the band dropped, which was like, I think early February, outperformed every other song that band's ever released in the last 5 years. Right? And it was because we played that song on tour and it was not available yet. It was a song we played every night on the road, and we said it's a new song, it's coming soon, but you couldn't buy it at the merch table, you couldn't stream it on Spotify. We dropped it after the tour, which was my suggestion again, like, we got to come out with this new song after the tour. And it outperformed on streaming, and the music video and everything outperformed everything the band's ever done. It was great because we had a month of hyping it. We had a month of hyping it across America.
Yeah.
And so, you know, eventually we actually did have to do a merch reorder, but it wasn't the first week of the tour, and it wasn't even t-shirts. It was physical CDs we sold out of and had to reorder 2 weeks into the tour because they didn't bring enough. They thought, well, no one's going to buy CDs. Well, we sold out in 2 weeks because you didn't bring enough. You know, they had them. They had boxes of them in the garage. They left them, you know, so they had to have an emergency order, which cut into the profits now.
Yeah.
You know, we eventually sold out of t-shirts and stuff like that, but we were selling out of t-shirts and things like that by the last 2 or 3 shows of the tour, you know, a month in. So they didn't listen to me on any of the things I tried to warn them about. They didn't listen to me on the things they should be planning for next. Great, let's go out every 6 months. Let's go out on the road. We got to set it up 6 months to a year in advance, get the bookings, things like that. Even when we came back from that tour, their manager called them and said, all right, I have these tour offers right here. Which one do you want? And they were like, well, we gotta recover from the last one. And you know what happened 3 months ago? I got the Dear John letter. Thanks for all your support. It's been truly great, but we're not playing live anymore. We're done.
Yeah. What do you think it is about? I've seen this happen so many times, but I think like a lot of people, they get into bands and they join bands and they start bands because they have this big dream of being in a band and doing the rock star thing. But once like they get some kind of success, they realize, oh, this is actually a lot more work than I thought, or this is actually not what I thought it was. So I think a lot of bands go into it, but they go into it, it's like a half measure instead of a full measure. Like they don't fully like submit to it, like what it takes to do it. So maybe that's why like some of these bands, they do a tour and then they're like, oh, I need to take a break, or oh, I don't want to think about what I'm doing next. You know what I mean? Like, so I've seen a lot of that too, and there are
some people, like you said, like we're lifers. There are some people that are built for this. There are some people that are lifers, and this is who they are. This is their identity. I am a musician. This is what I do. And then there are some people that like the idea of it. They might be talented at it, but then they get that reality check about all of the extra bullshit that comes along with it, all the hard work that comes along with it. It's not enough just to learn your instrument, practice it, and get good at it. You also have to learn how to market it. You also have to learn how to produce it. You also have to learn how to organize. And you're a file clerk, you're a secretary, you're a manager, and you're a musician, and you're like, you have to have 10 different hats on your head just to make one thing move forward a little bit. And a lot of people get that reality check of what it actually takes to make that happen and decide, well, this isn't for me.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with this band is they, you know, I kept pushing them like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And it was just dragging their feet on everything, not taking any of the advice that I gave them. And
why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that is?
I think that certain people, without, you know, calling out specifically who in the band or anything, I just think certain people got that reality check. I think they had an idea of like, this could be successful, this could be great, and then they saw, especially on that tour we did last year, where we were a support band for a much more well-established band that's been around for 30 years and like, you know, has their audience dialed in and isn't going anywhere. They saw the back end of what it takes to actually do this, you know? And I think they just decided maybe it's more trouble than it's worth. Maybe this isn't what I thought it was. I should put my energy and my effort elsewhere, you know, into something that I've already got going beforehand or whatever it is. Or, you know, I think it's just that reality check where not everybody knows what it takes to do all this stuff. You know, it's not like the old days where you start a band, you get a record deal, you sign with a management company, and then they kind of just take care of everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They give you an advance. All right, go to Sound City, record your album. We'll take care of the marketing. We'll schedule the video shoot. And we'll
just go be an artist, and we'll take care of everything. All your responsibilities.
That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. And especially nowadays, you really, all of the burden and all of the work is put on your shoulders as the artist. So you can't just be an artist. You have to be everything. Yep. You have to be a marketing genius. You have to be a production manager. You have to be a producer. Everything. And some people are built for it. Some people aren't. And
even when you have a team, that still doesn't mean you're not involved in those processes. No. You're still doing work. Just because you have a publicist, you have a manager, you have an agent, you have whoever, you have your team, that doesn't mean that you don't have to do anything. You know what I mean?
You're still responsible for it.
That actually means you have more work to do. You know, so it's like so many types of bands and just individuals, like they come in hot and they're like, oh my God, they seem so passionate and they seem so like, we're gonna take over the world with our band and our music, and this is gonna be the best record I've ever done, and we're gonna be so great, and yeah, we're gonna hire you, and you're gonna be, you need to really step up for our band as a drummer, and you really need to make us sound amazing as a producer because we're the shit. And then every single one of those people that have said that, they are no longer in music.
Yeah,
their band like didn't go anywhere. They are no longer in music. They're like, I've cooking or something.
Seen it so many times. I've seen so many bands just crash and burn the minute they get that little dose of reality, and and it's sort of in a weird way, it sort of just thins out the pack of like, okay, these people maybe shouldn't have been doing this anyway, or or maybe it's just a hobby for them, and you're allowed to have whatever hobby you want. So you can write your music or do whatever it is as your hobby on your side, but don't expect it to take the forefront and to make a career for yourself if you're not going to put that effort into it. If you're going to have it as a hobby, like, don't get disappointed when nothing happens with it. When you get 5 people listening to it on Spotify and not 500,000, like, expect that. Go in prepared knowing what you're doing there. If I'm just playing guitar as a hobby and I'm going to put a couple songs out, maybe 1 or 2 people listen to it, like, just know that's there's the ceiling you're putting on it for yourself.
Right.
If you're not going to put any more effort behind it.
Right.
Yeah, it's that. And I don't know if you've run into these kinds of people too, that like, the musician where like it's kind of a hobbyist thing, but they don't ever come across like it's a hobby. They come across like, no, this is what we're doing, but like you don't hear from them for like 2 years at a time, where they book a show and we go and play a show or a block of shows or something like that, and then all of a sudden they just kind of disappear, and you are like, well, I guess that's done. And then all of a sudden, a year or 2 later, they come back out and they're like, hey, we're gonna put some shows together and we're gonna play some shows. And like, I've worked with a ton of people like that, where if you look at all the times I've either recorded or performed live with them, there's like these large gaps in between where they just disappear. And I'm like, what are you doing? If you're not doing your music, if you're not putting this into your quote unquote career, what are you doing? Clearly this is just a hobby for you then.
Right. It's a hobby. And they don't want to admit that it is, because they feel like, oh, well, my music is so great and I'm so great, like, and we deserve to be huge, but they don't put the full-time work into it.
I've started trying to weed those people out too a little bit, because I would be like, they'd call me up after me not hearing from them for a year. They're playing 1 show a year, or they're playing 1-2 shows every couple years. And my thing was like, well, I already know the song, so I might as well go make a couple bucks for the night. So I always took it as like, well, it's not that much extra effort I got to put in to go do this. But I'd say in the last year or so, like anytime I get those calls from people that I've worked with for a number of years, but like once a year, I've been telling them no. Yeah. Just because, why am I going to go dust off these songs that we haven't played in a year just to go play one night at some local dive, and then I won't hear from you for another year? Like, why am I going to put that effort in just for a quick paycheck on the weekend?
Right.
It's almost not worth the effort at that point, and I've gotten better about saying no to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think, I agree with that. I mean, as we get older, as our priorities change, it's like, time is the most valuable thing really that we have. So it's like, I find it, speaking for myself, like I'm basically much more selective about like who I work with and like what I'm doing. So I completely relate with you there. It's like, you have other things going on, so you might as well focus on, the projects that are more serious and more professional. So that makes total sense.
So, well, where the one difference might be, though, with you and I is because you're doing a lot on the production side of it, doing the recording and stuff like that. So, with how involved you are on that end of it, I can see where you want to be a little more selective about the kinds of things you're putting your name on.
Right.
When it comes to recording, I'll do anything. Like, it could be someone who's doing a demo in his basement and never sees the light of day, but you want me to play drums on it? Cool. I'll do that. I'll play drums on anybody's recording. It's when it comes to playing live that I'm much pickier now than I used to be. I used to say yes to everything because that was always the advice you're always told. You're always told, just say yes to every gig. Say yes to every gig. Well, then you look back and you're like, maybe I shouldn't have said yes to that because it was a shit show.
Well, like, I think when you're starting your career, it's, you say yes to more things, and because then you can figure out what you like and what you don't like and how you want to be seen and how you don't want to. You figure things out. But yeah, as you get farther into your career with music, I think it's much more beneficial to be more selective.
I'm a little more careful about who I'm seen on stage with versus who I'm heard on a recording with. With a recording, there's a certain level of control that I have where it's like, this person might not be super talented, or maybe they can't sing or they can't play, but the one thing no one's going to be able to talk shit about is the drums on this record.
Well, and you can always say, yeah, I'll do this gig for that amount, but just don't put my name on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've never done that. I've never had someone take my name off because I was always afraid of like offending them.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know. I was always afraid. And there's definitely some projects I've recorded for where I'm like, I just don't promote it. Like if I record with somebody, when that song or that album or whatever comes out, I'm always gonna like share it and be like, hey, check out this thing I recorded on. Right? There's a few that I don't do that for, where the record comes out and I just. That's your record. That's on you to push and promote.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily going to push and promote it, but you go ahead. That's yours. And that's like the one thing that where at least I have the peace of mind to go, and people can listen to that and go, man, that person can't sing, but no one can talk shit about the drum performance on that record because I know what happened. Yeah. So. So I'm a little more liberal with who I'll record with. Like, I don't say no to people for recording much. I just will be careful about my end of promoting it, saying, yes, I was a part of this kind of thing. If it's something that came out great and I'm really proud of it, I'm going to want to splash it all over the place and tell people that, hey, I recorded this thing. If it's something that's not great, I'm not going to say anything about it. But absolutely. My name will still be on it, but I just don't necessarily have to be the one shouting from the rooftops for people to listen to it. But yeah, in a live setting, it's much different where I try to field that a little bit better, because recording, it's just a different world. Like, I'll sit in the studio and I'll be able to sit with the material and sit with the song and practice through it a few times and work on it. Okay, I got a good take of that one. Let me move on to this next thing or whatever. Live, it's like all or nothing. Like, I got to learn the set. I got to get on stage. I got to play it as best as I can flawlessly for the next hour, and there is no take two. If I break a stick, like, I got to toss it and grab another one. I can't be like, hang on, hold up, cut, let me punch this part in. I can't do that live. So live, I'm much pickier about who I perform with, because if it is going to be a dumpster fire, like, maybe I don't want to be seen on that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally, man. All right, Nick, so before we wrap it up, where can everyone find you and check out all your tour dates and what you have going on?
Everything on the internet is under Living Dead Drummer. So livingdeaddrummer.com. I try to keep that as well maintained and as updated as possible. So it will always have links to all of the latest recordings I've done, music videos that have come out that I'm a part of, and it will always have the most up-to-date tour dates on there. So like every time I get a confirmed date, the first thing I do is go to my website and update it. So my calendar is as accurate as possible on there. So that's where you can see all that. Social media stuff is all under the same handle, Living Dead Drummer. So on every social media platform that you use, just, look up Living Dead Drummer. It's me. It's all me. Unless there's a fake account out there, which I'm not aware of, but to the best of my ability, or the best of my knowledge anyway, it's all me. End of August, starting on the 23rd of August, I will be on tour with Jason Charles Miller. We are going out in support of Steel Panther. We'll be out with them until September 14th, all East Coast dates, kicking off in my hometown of Buffalo, New York, which I'm excited about.
Sweet.
So we're out with them till September 14th, and then immediately, beginning on September 15th, I will be out with Pretty Boy Floyd. I think my first show with them is the 16th in Toronto. And then it's all also East Coast, like all the same kind of areas and cities that I just did with Jason. We're going to do all those cities again with Floyd, and we'll be out with Trickster and Enough's Enough. And the opening band is called Band Inc. It's the same tour that we did. We did like Midwest cities and Texas dates and stuff like that with that same tour a couple months ago. So this is the second leg of the tour. And that goes until September 29th, I think. Or 30th, or however many days there are in September. End of September, that one goes till.
Right on.
And that's where you can find me.
Great, man. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming by and having a second chat with me.
This was fun, man. This was awesome. I'm glad we did this.
4 years later. So I appreciate you. Appreciate your time. And
thank you.
Everyone, go check out Living Dead Drummer.
Thank
Cheers.
you.